also considered as the fourth state, yeah?
Absolutely.
Having a watchful eyes on the government activities, what's going on, not only the government, but private investors as well, you know?
So to really answer your question, so I just wanted to give you that background to tell you that it is in my DNA really to consider that because I'm a former journalist also, African journalist, it's really in my DNA to consider that and that's one of the things I'm explaining to the students I'm meeting across Africa, journalism students. That's journalism is not a work like other. I mean, you have a responsibility. I remember I think it was in Uganda, in Makerere University, which is the biggest university in Uganda. And I remember that young student telling me, well, we would like to, fight. We like to but it's difficult. It's difficult, and I don't know if we can, because most of the media are actually owned by politics and stuff, etc. So it's very difficult, and she was very fatalist, and I told her, listen. First of all, right now you are where you are, but clearly the situation is better now than it was 20 years ago. And the reason for that is because you are part of a chain. And before you, some journalists were engaged in that fight, And you're going to just, during your career as a journalist, you're going to just take your part in that chain, And it's moving. It is definitely moving. Now, if you don't understand that you have a responsibility more than, I don't know, a baker or a builder, and not disrespect, in promoting democracy, good governance, etc. If you don't appreciate that, if you're not aware of your responsibility, and or if you think that fight is too much for you, do something else. Do something else, because we need strong journalists. It's fundamental for the eventually and not only for democracy or whatever. When you think about the role the media and the journalists, right, are having in, for instance, health, promoting a good practice and sector, etc., spreading the news about how to avoid whatever contamination in whatever, and it's only one example, right? So the media are key to the development of the continent, and I'm not talking only about business here. I'm really talking about development in all the aspects of all the aspects where you can imagine. So for me, media are extremely important, and that is why I'm so concerned about the evolution of the African media landscape, because you were referring to those conferences I'm giving in journalism schools across Africa. So each country I'm traveling, I'm giving 1, 2, 3 conferences, usually in the most important journalism schools and PR also. And the topic of the conference is the international media are investing in Africa. Is it a good news for the continent? So tomorrow I will be at the Addis University, the day after at Makerere University, and we're going to discuss that. And the problem I see is that, you see, a media is a company. I mean, media needs money. I mean, even if you are public media, you still need money, right? To invest, making sure you have the right cameras, making sure you have the right talents, you can retain the talents, you can invest in digitalization, you can find the right model to make money, etc. You need money. And so money still, for most of the private media, still come from advertising. The problem is, so you have, on one hand, you have all these multinational companies expanding across Africa. So there is, as we speak, there is 420 companies, US company, which has an office in South Africa, and 320, if I'm not mistaken, German company with an office in South Africa. But what has changed in the last few years, and really couple of years, is that now they want to expand. They want to go Ghana, to Nigeria, to etc. From their base in South Africa, they want to expand. And so you see companies which are more and more appointing Africa CEOs. They didn't have that before. They had a CEO dealing with Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa, or whatever. So they are appointing Africa CEO because they want to tap into the potential, the growth, of the continent. They see growth figure in Africa they don't see anywhere else, and that leads some multinational. I can take that example. I will not mention the name, but one of our clients, which is a big multinational, they just appointed for the first time their CEO for Africa, and they give that person the assignment, the objective, to multiply the turnover by 10 in 5 years, which is huge. It is not the kind of an assignment you can give to a CEO in France or whatever. You cannot do that. The figures are not there. And I'm speaking from Ethiopia, 8.5. Well, that's something. So you can do things here you cannot do somewhere else. But those companies, they used to be headquartered in South Africa, but now they see Ethiopia, 8.5. Ooh. So they are arriving, and they are arriving with big, fat advertising budget. Because when a company is giving an assignment, such an assignment to a CEO saying, listen, you're going to develop the brand and you need to multiply the turnover by 10 in 5 years, well, obviously the guy say, well, okay, well, how much resource do you give me to do that? I'm going to need to put advertisement, I'm going to need to do some PR, etc., etc. And so there will be in the coming years a lot of advertisement marketing spending across Africa made by the multinational companies. But so you could say, well, okay, well, you could open the bottle of champagne, right? Because it's good news for the African media landscape. Problem is, in the meantime, 3-4 years ago, a phenomenon started, which is that the international media, the so-called international media, started to invest massively into Africa. The number of examples is plenty of examples. So BBC just opened the biggest office outside of the UK, and it is in Nairobi. It's not in Washington. I mean, if you take somebody in the street and you ask him, okay, listen, BBC just opened their biggest office outside of the UK. Is it Washington? Is it Shanghai? Or is it Nairobi? Well, it's Nairobi. And they hired 300 journalists. But
that also brings us to our first question. What's their interest? Are they going to report an African news like Africans, or do they have another agenda?
Their interest, specifically, and because I don't want to mention only BBC, CNN as we speak 6 programs dedicated to Africa. To my knowledge, CNN doesn't have a program dedicated to Eastern Europe, or they have one for Asia, but they don't have for Latin America, and they have only one for Asia. Africa, 6 programs. I mean, that tells something. There is a reason for that. And you have Huffington Post, which has invested in North Africa. You have that company, a Swiss company called Ringier, which is based in Swiss and Switzerland, and on their website they introduce themselves as the leading Pan-African publisher. And it is a fact that in a span of a few years, they expanded. I mean, they manage a website called Pulse, and they expanded in several countries, and they're expanding very fast. So there's plenty of example. Washington Post just announced that they were expanding in Africa. So there's plenty of example which show that the international media has actually anticipated the trend, and they are here. You just asked me why they are here, and I understand. You are referring to an editorial point of view, but again, they are businesses, they are companies. They are here for the budget, advertisement budget of the multinational company, which they know already. They are already best buddies in the US, in the UK, etc. So they are here because they anticipated that. Well, first of all, there are more and more African indigenous companies which may have the budget to put advertisement. Look at Dangote. Dangote is advertising on CNN, right? Yeah. Glo, the Nigeria telecom company, is advertising on CNN. Tony Elumelu Foundation is advertising on CNN. How is it even possible? Do you know Tony Elumelu? Do you know who he is? No. Who is a Nigerian billionaire, philanthropist, etc. So, but I mean, there is something something wrong. Because, for instance, Tony Lumelu is launching that. He's not launching. He's operating that well-established program of mentorship, and basically he's helping startups. And so, if you want to be part of the program as a startup, you need to apply. Mm-hmm. So it's basically on a yearly basis. The Tony Lumelu Foundation is launching a call for entry, if you want, for African young entrepreneurs to apply. How do you know he's advertising it? He's advertising it on CNN. I mean, the best way, according to him, to talk to the African youth and to tell entrepreneurs to tell them apply is to put an ad on CNN.
Mm-hmm. Because the African youth are watching the CNN. Okay.
They will continue. They will continue because that's where the hats are anyway. So they will continue.
So if African investors, African millionaires, they are not investing in African medias, who's going to help the media? How is it going to grow?
Well, so you
all this competition.
Yeah, like everybody, I'm having that discussion with after I explained to you the scope of the problem, etc. You asking me, well, what is the solution? I will tell you, I don't have a solution. I don't have a solution. I don't have a solution. The only thing I can tell you is, since I'm discussing that topic, and I discuss, believe me, that topic with a lot of people. Last person I discussed that topic with a few hours ago was the head of communication of the African Union Commission, Leslie Richer. Since I'm discussing that topic, I'm always hoping, in the back of my head, that somebody is going to tell me, Nicolas, are you kidding? It's impossible. You're being paranoid. Paranoia is something you missed. Obviously, it's not going to happen. Be realistic. I never find that person. Everybody's telling me, wow, yes, indeed. Yes, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for the African media landscape. They won't be able to invest. They will lose the competition on talent, the battle on the talent, on the content. They will lose the battle. They will not be able to digitalize. And as I said, a weaker media landscape is not good for Africa. It's not good for Africa. It will lead to acculturation because now the more and more Africans are going to learn about Africa through the international media. It poses a problem of sovereignty because what if in 10 years, let's take a realistic scope, 10 years from now, more than 50% of the Ethiopian are learning about what is happening in their country from BBC or Al Jazeera. That's a problem of sovereignty, problem of acculturation, as I said. If the kids, if the young Ethiopian are learning about what is happening in Kenya, or they are learning Africa through CNN, is it really what we want? Through CNN program, that's acculturation, and if we discuss that very topic long enough, you or I will pronounce the name of colonization, and it will be the worst kind of colonization. That's the one of the mind. So it is very bad. It is very, very bad. Now, having said that, and I'm sorry, but I do not have the solution. I know the African Union Commission is working on launching a Pan-African TV channel, but I mean, no offense to the African Union Commission, but there is history of the African community creating Pan-African media, and I'm referring to Pana-Press. I don't know if you know Pana-Press, yeah? Yeah. Well, you know where Pana-Press is now. Okay, so, well, no, and also I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. Also, I think I truly believe there is a business opportunity. It doesn't necessarily have to be a project which is a project which is led by governments or institutions or whatever. The company or the person or the entrepreneur, whatever, which is going to crack the code here, which is going to be able to create the Pan-African TV channel, and you don't need to be available in all 54 countries or to cover all 54 countries, but if you cover 35 countries, well, you can start. It's a good start already. The one which is going to create that thing with an African content flavor, etc. I mean, as I said, that person will be in a position to get a fair chunk of that big fat advertising spending, which is coming one way or the other. It is coming. It's just a matter of where is it going to go. Now, if in 5 years, studies from all the market research says that by putting an ad on CNN, you are touching more people than by putting one ad on a Nigerian TV channel, one ad on the Ghanaian TV channel, one ad on the Ethiopian TV channel.
It's not,
what do you think is going to happen?
So, which brings me back to your company, APO. It started in 2007 and it has come a long way, and it is distributing across Europe and in Africa. It's also collecting articles and news feeds from different African countries. What kind of impact has it made, from the time you started, with the objective you started, to promote African issues, not just the negative ones, but the positive, the good, and kind of inspirational news feeds. In that respect, how have you come along and, putting the news out there and the status that you are in?
I'll say that when it's come to spreading good news about Africa, I can say with confidence that we are the leader in that field, meaning that we are by far. You can take any form of KPI metrics. We are by far the leader in terms of distribution of corporate news related to Africa or financial news related to Africa. We are distributing tens of thousands of news releases a year. Regarding all the continent. I mean, we have press releases about Eritrea, about Ethiopia, about so the volume of content we are distributing and the way we are distributing it, so the reach we are having, our ability to spread that news across the world is unique, definitely unique. Now, does that make an impact? We had I forgot the figure, but I think. Yeah, no. So we made an annual report at the beginning of this year, and I asked the IT team to give me the exact number of web pages our content, our news release has generated in 2018. We are above 800,000 on a year. Or maybe I'm wrong actually. I think it's more, but anyway, this is huge, and the volume of content we are spreading, and on average, a press release distributed by APO on average is picked up by 300 websites, on average. So each story, 300 websites. And one thing about news release and press release is that usually they are conveying good news. Usually, most of them, corporate news are, you're rarely issuing a press release to say where we are. So usually it's we are expanding in that country, we are opening an office, we are appointing a new CEO, we are venturing into that thing, etc., etc. So it's usually positive news. And so, it's another thing I could say about the impact we are having is that we are focusing here on the press release distribution business, but we are doing much more than that. And we are, for instance, organizing a lot of interviews with the CNN, the BBC, the Al Jazeera, etc., etc. And in all these interviews, 90% of them convey a positive image of the continent. So do we have an impact? We just signed that partnership with Getty Images. So Getty Images is the leading, by far the leading photo company in the world, if you wish. They are the king of photo imagery in the world, and And so the idea is through, so they have a lot of subscribers. All the newsroom, international newsroom have subscribers to Getty Images. And the idea is that through the partnership is very comprehensive, but through the partnership, all the content provided by APO, all the images, but also the press releases provided by APO, would be made available to all Getty Images subscribers. Which leads us to say that, and it's just another channel we are opening to our content is already available to Bloomberg subscribers, Bloomberg terminal. It's already available to Thomson Reuters. Now it's going to be available to Getty Image subscribers, and so we are literally with Getty Images, which is specialized in image. We are literally changing the objectives to change the image of Africa one picture at a time, because Getty, Bloomberg, Reuters, their subscribers are in the US, they are in the UK, they are in Russia, they are in Europe, they are in Asia, etc., etc. So, so right now, if you are subscribers on one of those platforms, well, you're going to find 90% of good news about Africa. You know. So, what kind of impact have we made? I mean, obviously it's difficult to measure, and there is so many different angles. For instance, as I said, one way to look at APO is as a content provider. So we provide content to the media landscape. Well, this is important. This is important. I mean, since I'm in Ethiopia, and I met I don't know 5-7 journalists. They all of them, because I asked them, all of them told me that they are receiving APO content, the press releases, and they are using them. Not all of them, but we don't want them to. That's not the point. But it is useful to them, and it is content. And media needs content. What do you do with content? I mean, you sell the content. So we provide the media landscape with free, accurate, sourced, authoritative content. When you receive a press release from APO, you don't have to wonder if it is fake news or whatever. You know it's safe, and you can it's reliable. So that's also one way to look at what we're doing. So yeah, I think in 12 years of existence, definitely we must have had some kind of impact. But we are still very much brainstorming, working on making even more impact. So as we speak, we are discussing with a few other multinational companies in the media industry, and we may make a few announcements in the coming months. And we are reinforcing a few of our services, etc. So I think it's not not over. I think it's never ends. But there is what I saw in the last 2 years is there is definitely there is a momentum, because obviously when you look at the growth, the figures, okay, it's exciting. You look at the foreign direct investments, it's exciting. Usually we are talking about the growth and economy and finance and investment, etc. But I'll tell you that recently I had a lunch with the head of African contemporary art at Sotheby's, which is that big auction company. Sotheby's, it's a big company. And she was telling me how African contemporary art is booming, literally booming. So I said, what does that mean? She said, well, what that means is that a painting, for instance, which we used to sell $500 5 years ago, is now $5,000. That's what they call booming. So that is in art. And clearly in art, Africa is booming, contemporary art. I'll give you another example of a field where Africa is booming, which is sport. And I'm referring specifically to the NBA, which is one of our clients, the basketball. And so the number of African players, I mean people which actually were born in Africa, were trained in Africa, etc., which now are playing for the NBA. That number is growing, and they are more and more influential. They are very talented. They are really at the top of the ranking, etc. As an example, you have that Senegalese player called Gorgui Dieng. We just signed one of the biggest contract ever, 250 million for 4 years contract. It's more than $1 million a week, right? So that's has successful there, and there are many other stories like this. And it's not only on the field, because outside of the field. So as you may know, the NBA NBA is a company, by the way. They are doing basketball, but it's not a sport federation; it's a company, and so they are operating in the U.S. They have only one club which is out of the US, which is in Canada, which is Toronto Raptors. And the Toronto Raptors just won the competition this year. So they won the NBA championship this year. Do you know the nationality of the president of the Toronto Raptors? He's from Nigeria. He's Nigerian. He's Nigerian. And he won the competition. He's the president of a club is like the CEO, if you wish, right? So he's the CEO of the Toronto Raptors, and he's Nigerian. When he arrived in the US, he was sleeping in a garage. Yeah.
Starts low.
Yeah, and it just won the NBA.